What would Bruce Wayne do without Batman? It's winter in Gotham. Under the snow, we find the same expressionist nightmare from the first movie, but the city has changed. Its economic and cultural center has moved from historic Gotham Square to the commercial district of Gotham Plaza. Batman may have rid the city of the Joker, but he has done nothing to rid it of the deep social inequalities that are at the source of the high crime rate in Gotham and which led to the creation of the Joker. As a result, the rich are richer, the workers are killing themselves from long hours and having burnouts, and the poor are now living in the sewers. It's been months since the Joker died, and Batman gave the police a way to contact him. In his mansion as empty as his social life, he waits. He waits for the moment we'll need him. He waits for someone to give him a reason to live. So, what would Bruce Wayne do without Batman? Apparently not much. Unlike when we first see him in the 1989 film, Bruce is no longer confused about his identity. He made his choice. He has decided to surrender himself completely to Batman and give up his quest for normal life. With twice the budget he had for the first film, Tim Burton dug twice as deep in his imagination and his references. 2 actors from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest rather than 1. Batman no longer faces 1 opponent, but 3. And these are psychological confrontations, because Batman Returns script, written by Daniel Waters and Sam Hamm, is not plot-driven, but character-driven. We don't care that Max Shreck wants to steal power from other towns. We don't care that the Penguin wants to be mayor, and we don't care if Catwoman is on his side or not. What matters is how all of these characters will compete against each other as they are each at a different stage of the same quest, that of a normal life. Welcome to Frank Movie Talks, I'm Frank, and today I'm going to explore Batman Returns. At the start of the film, Bruce Wayne doesn't seem to be doing much except waiting for someone to give him a reason to put on his Batman costume. That being said, we now see him working hard, but it only lasts for one scene. One scene that serves to show his meeting with Selina Kyle, who makes him confused again about his identity.
This is Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, we've met.
Have we?
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I mistook me for somebody else. Sorry.
The rest of his time, Bruce prefers to spend it in the Batcave, which he accesses through a secret passage even though he and Alfred are the only ones living in the mansion, and even though Alfred can use a staircase that goes there quicker. So not only has Batman ditched Bruce, but he fuels his own myth even when it's not necessary, even when there's no one watching. He even upgraded his costume. No more fat cheeks or staring into the dark. Now the mask matches Michael Keaton's crazy face, demonic eyes, and sadistic smile. We even apologize for the continuity error of his makeup since it's so beautiful to see him tear off his mask and reject his identity in a desperate attempt to convince the woman he loves to remain the woman he loves.
I just couldn't live with myself.
So let's talk about Selina Kyle. Selina is finally the femme fatale expected of Vicky Vale in the first movie. In terms of the soundtrack, Danny Elfman associates her to strings, which contrasts Batman's brass, and her theme once again seems to be straight out of Vertigo. Catwoman's patched-up costume, a foreshadowing of Sally's appearance in Nightmare Before Christmas, is a metaphor for her fragmented identity. When Max Shreck defenestrated her, Selina shattered, and Catwoman represents whatever she managed to stitch together from her identity, incorporating elements that were not present before in order to replace pieces that were forever lost. But why Selina choose to become a cat? Visually full of meaning, the film offers several avenues. Of course, after Max Shreck kills her, she's brought back to life by cats. The cat is also the logo of Max Shreck's store, and therefore Selina robbing Shreck of the cat symbol could be seen as both revenge and empowerment. When Catwoman attacks Max Shreck's store, she attacks both capitalism and consumerism, like the Joker in the first movie, but she also attacks misogyny.
I don't know whether to open fire or fall in love.
You poor guys. Always confusing your pistols with your privates.
Don't hurt us, lady. Our take-home's less than 300.
However, the scene that strikes me as the most important in explaining why Selina chooses to become a cat is the one where we see her entering her apartment for the first time. In that scene, her cat represents everything she desires. Freedom, an active life, we could as well say sexually active,
Back for more sexual escapades refuse to share?
and a total indifference to conventions and social pressures accumulating on her answering machine.
Selina, dear, it's your mother. Just called to say hello.
Yeah, right, but
But I'm disappointed you're not coming home for Christmas.
Throughout the film, Selina hesitates between returning to a normal life or completely surrendering herself to Catwoman, just like Bruce surrendered himself to Batman. So it's extremely hypercritical of Bruce to ask her to get back to a normal life, even if that's what he's willing to do for her. Unlike many Hollywood female characters, Selina harbors a desire that is not compatible with the love story offered to her by the male hero. And rather than abandon the woman she wants to become for the sake of love, she abandons the man who doesn't respect the woman she wants to become, thus condemning Bruce, who made her his last chance at a normal life, to remain Batman forever. At the beginning of the 1989 movie, the camera climbed Grissom's tower to show us through a modern version of Dracula's castle that crime reigns in Gotham. At the beginning of Batman Returns, we get a similar take on the tower of another vampire, which shows us that what really reigns in Gotham is patriarchal capitalism. I say vampire because Max Shreck is the name of the actor who played Count Orlok in Nosferatu, the first and illegal film adaptation of Dracula, but also because he intends to suck electricity from other cities like a vampire, and when he kills Selina Kyle, she comes back to life vampirized. In Batman Returns, all the characters are animals. Batman is a bat, Catwoman is a cat, the Penguin is a penguin, and Max Shreck is a billionaire capitalist. In other words, a vampire. In other words, a bat. A billionaire and capitalist bat like Bruce Wayne.
You're fired.
If in the first movie Batman was faced with a monster, in Batman Returns, the stakes are much higher, and higher than they ever will be in all the other film adaptations that have come out since. He is now faced with the one who creates the monsters, to the Dr. Pretorius, who manipulated the Penguin as he manipulated Dr. Frankenstein, and who created Catwoman as he created the Bride of Frankenstein. Max Shreck left a deeper mark on the Batman universe than most people believe. Initially, the character was supposed to be Harvey Dent, who, rather than being electrocuted in the end, would have come out half disfigured to become Two-Face in the third movie. There was also talk of making him the perfect brother of Oswald Cobblepot, who would have been entitled to their parents' love and inheritance. But it was instead decided to make a new character out of him, who, in the great tradition of the most classic horror films, shows us that the monsters are just victims, and that behind each of them hides a capitalist.
Derrière chaque homme se cache un tout-tu.
This is a formula that was understood and repeated in the animated series from the 90s in order to give some Batman's adversaries a mature and tragic origin story, but also to show that Arkham's patients are only victims manipulated by unscrupulous businessmen. Max Shreck is the foundation stone on which Bruce Timm and Paul Dini would rely to reinvent classic opponents like Mr. Freeze and the Riddler.
This company is making millions from my genius.
If you're so smart, why aren't you rich?
Max was also scheduled to appear in the series, but he was replaced by Roland Daggett, who was responsible for creating Clayface and infecting Catwoman with a fatal disease, among other things. In turn, Roland Daggett inspired Derek Powers, Batman's worst enemy in Batman Beyond, and John Daggett in The Dark Knight Rises. Coming back to Max Shreck himself, through his store, whose logo recalls both Felix the Cat and Mickey Mouse, he reigns not only over Gotham, but over Christmas, this great celebration of love, sharing, and family, all things that were taken from the other three characters, and which has been perverted into a celebration of capitalism. While Max Shreck may seem less impressive to kids who wants to see monstrous dual identity characters like Batman, Catwoman, and the Penguin, he nonetheless becomes the most terrifying of all when you watch the movie with adult eyes. Because Max Shreck does indeed have a dual identity, much more insidious than the other three. The humble philanthropist close to the citizens and friendly to the less fortunate like the Penguin is but a facade that serves to mask the vampiric and murderous corporatist he really is. And he's the only one of the four characters who can lead a normal life despite this double identity. Unlike the Penguin and Catwoman, he belongs to the real world, the world in which monsters don't look like animals, the one in which there is no Batman to stop him. But Batman Returns is even more innovative since Batman is not the main character of the movie. This role is reserved to Oswald. The movie opens with his origin story, a twisted version of the myth of Moses, and in the end, rather than bring down the 10th plague of Egypt on the firstborn, he attempts to kidnap the newborns. We can also compare the Penguin to Jesus, since he was born around Christmas and died at the age of 33. But of course, it's to Bruce that he must be compared. Like him, Oswald belongs to Gotham's aristocratic elite, but his trauma is far worse than Bruce's. He didn't lose his parents because they were gunned down in an alley. He lost them because they threw him down the sewers. Unlike Batman, Catwoman, and Max Shreck, Oswald did not choose to surrender to a monstrous second identity. It was imposed to him after being stripped of his aristocratic as well as human identity. And what the Penguin wants is to reclaim that identity. He's never been entitled to a normal life like Max Shreck, he doesn't hesitate between a normal and an abnormal life like Selina Kyle, and he certainly hasn't given up on living a normal life like Bruce Wayne. This is arguably the film in which Batman is most aware of his resemblance to his opponents, as he's moved by a TV report that shows the Penguin searching for his parents. Bruce understands that what he's looking for is the human behind the animal, something he refuses to grant himself until Selina is willing to give it all up for him. Of course, the Penguin doesn't just want to regain his identity or status. He also wants revenge against the society that rejected him. He wants to rule over Gotham as mayor, with Catwoman by his side as both lover and housekeeper.
Please. I wouldn't touch you to scratch you.
As the hero, or rather anti-hero of the film, the Penguin from Batman Returns is a character who has many facets, beautifully illustrated in the many variations that Danny Elfman gives to his theme. A march that is both grim and silly, often accompanied by children's voices, sometimes a grotesque urban legend or a wounded freak show, sometimes a misogynist and infanticide crime lord. He is at the same time a hero, a villain, and ultimately a victim. Presented as a terrifying but misunderstood monster like Quasimodo, he ends up being a scapegoat for all of Gotham's problems, and his death is a wacky and pathetic tragedy. So, who out of these four characters does end up on top of this movie almost devoid of any plot, yet bursting with character development? The Penguin loses from the start, when, in a single scene, he goes from manipulator to manipulated, and his defeat is even more bitter in the end when he himself abandons his humanity to agree with all of those who have rejected him and who all his life called him Penguin.
I am not a human being! I am an animal! Cold-blooded!
It's not Max Shreck either, who yet gets exactly what he wanted to give Gotham, a lot more electricity than he needed. And it's not Batman, because we're not in a superhero movie with a happy ending. We're in a film noir. Forget it, Bruce, it's Gotham. His Christmas, he'll spend it all alone in an alley, where his story began, where Catwoman's story began, where all of Gotham's saddest stories began. In an alley, heartbroken by the woman he loved, face scratched by the woman he loved, and a black cat synonymous of bad luck as a consolation prize. So, who ends up on top? The one that reappears in the last shot of the movie, a shot recalling the last one in the 1989 movie to make us understand that her decision has been made. As Selina was showing through the cracks of Catwoman's costume a few minutes ago, now the costume has completely closed on Selina. As always, thank you for watching, and as always, I hope you enjoyed this episode. This concludes my exploration of Tim Burton's duology, which remains Batman's most poetic and richest film adaptation to this day. The tone subsequently changes with Joel Schumacher's duology, but before I talk about it, I'm going to make a quick stop at another Batman movie released in theaters between Batman Returns and Batman Forever. If you don't want to miss it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and please show some support by liking it.
Well, come what may. Merry Christmas, Mr. Wayne.
Merry Christmas, Albert.
Goodwill toward men.